Welcome, everyone, to the F6P DFS Kickoff Show. I'm your host, Keith Flemming. With me, my man, Joe the Brain Matz. Joe, we are on fire, my friend. Each week, we give our favorite DraftKings plays, median and value. They have to be 6,900 or below on DK. Last week, Joe, of our 18 plays, 4 of the top 8 scores on DraftKings, but even more impressive, 4 of the top 5 plays in that price range. Only Jared Goff did we miss of the top 5 scores in that 6,900 or lower range. I hope that we continue at this pace because, like I said, we are on fire the last couple of weeks.
Yeah, it really is just trying to keep the momentum going.
Which
is good because it's always better to be trying to do that versus trying to reverse the momentum and get something started.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's our bad, guys. We blew it last week.
If I could get my stream deck going, Joe, which I'm just too lazy to figure out, we could hit the NBA Jam. He's on fire right now. So maybe I'll actually
love that.
Get my shit together in the next week and we can start having some sound drops. Before we get into this, because we're going to get right into it, do want to remind everyone you can become an all-access member at Fantasy Six Pack, and in doing so, you get access to some amazing tools, rankings, access to the Discord where you can contact any of the great contributors and members of the Fantasy Six Pack team. If you use the promo code F6P NFL, you can get 10% off. It is 100% worth it. The DFS alone, again, not just us, Dave, Eddie, and Chris, Robin, aka Detroit Beastie, do a phenomenal job on Fridays on the DFS Den. Chris does more content than any person in the world. At the bottom of the barrel, it is absolutely amazing to see the work and research that he puts in, so that way you can have information on all these lower price players and make the decision for yourself, which is kind of the same thing that we do. But I want to get right into it, Joe, because last week I said I wasn't thrilled about it. This week I feel pretty good. Let's start with the QBs. Full discretion, Lamar is the guy I like the most this week, and he will probably be in a majority of my lineups. I'll get into kind of why when I talk about one of his pass catchers in a little bit. So because of that, I'm going to go all the way down to Jordan Love for my median play, 5,800 at Denver. And this is a lot about just Denver stinks. I mean, their defense is absolutely atrocious. They're allowing 22.1 points per game to opposing quarterbacks on DraftKings. Opposing QBs have scored 21 points or more in 4 of 6 games on DraftKings versus the Broncos. Love is coming off, without a doubt, his worst game. If I was a Packers fan, I would be very concerned about, is Jordan Love the answer? But luckily, we don't have to worry about that. I'm not a Packers fan. I don't really care. I just care about how he does in fantasy. And in fantasy, he's been really good, even with the bad game last week, averaging 19.24 points on DK. He scored 19.6 points or more in 4 of 5, 20 points or more in 3 of 5. And again, this Denver defense is atrocious. They've allowed just ridiculous 30-plus points in 4 of their 6 games this season. And one sneaky thing about Love that I like this week, the rushing upside. He has quietly rushed for 20 yards or more in 3 of his last 4 games and scored 2 rushing touchdowns, which that's always huge because, the extra point, 6 points compared to the 4 for the passing touchdowns. I think Jordan Love is a pretty safe play. There's some really good options. I'm going to talk about Musgrave. I don't care if you like Watson, Dobbs. There's a lot of cheap options with that. And there's a lot of expensive guys I like this week. So Jordan Love is my median play. Who is yours, my friend?
I'm going with Geno Smith at 6,000. Not the most impressive year thus far for Geno Smith. Really just had that one big game against Detroit, the only team to beat Detroit this year so far, the Seattle Seahawks. Otherwise, kind of a muted, I was going to say second season as the starter in Seattle because he's actually been in the league like 10 years now. But yeah, he's had a 15-point game, a 16-point game. Not quite what you were hoping for if you had him in season long or if you played him outside of that Detroit game. But I mean, I think the underlying stuff suggests he's due for some bounce back. His PFF
Especially
grade
when
is
playing the Cardinals, right?
Exactly. His PFF grade is not far off from what it was last year. So at least according to them, his play hasn't really dropped off. We just haven't seen the same production. And yeah, now we're getting the Arizona Cardinals, one of the set right teams where, again, Giants have looked complete trash except for when they played the Cardinals. The Bengals have looked mediocre to trash except when they played the Cardinals. Even last week, didn't get the numbers we wanted out of Matthew Stafford, but he had 226 yards and a touchdown on 24 passes.
And boy, did Cooper
so
Kupp
it's still, yeah. So it's 9 yards an attempt. They just didn't really have to do more than toss it to Cooper Kupp 10 times, and they had the game won. They're giving up 8 yards per pass attempt. That's tied for third worst in the league. They're 31st in DVOA against the pass. This Cardinals team is just, they're bad defensively. I'm still a little confused what happened in that game. They beat the Cowboys. Loved it, but still confused. So this is, again, I don't know if it's a totally get-right game because I think Seattle's been okay on offense for the most part. Even last week, they moved the ball until they got to the red zone. Things kind of fell apart there. The Cardinals' defense is not the Bengals' defense. Do not expect, if they're moving the ball, for them to get stuffed inside the 20. I think they scored 3 times on 4 red zone attempts last week. If you get the ball into the red zone against the Cardinals 4 times, you got a couple of touchdowns at least. So I think this is a get-right game for Geno, and I love him at 6,000. Although I will say I really like that Jordan Love play too. So I think you can go either of those guys and feel confident. Not even like, I think, these lower tier guys, maybe we're feeling some risk, but I think with those two, I just feel good.
I completely agree. There's a lot of Seahawks I like this week. We can talk about some of them in a little bit. My value play this week is Desmond Ridder, 5,200, and you're probably going, Keith, did you see the interceptions that Desmond Ridder threw last week? Late in the game versus Washington? It was awful. That's very fair. But it's just his price and what is going on right now in this Atlanta offense. It's a Falcons fan. It's been really frustrating because we have not ran the ball at all like we did last year. And then the great Dave Eddy, who's a great follow on Twitter, Corporal Eddie, has been putting just some amazing stats on Twitter. And one of them made the picture just crystal clear. The top running backs and average defenders in the box per rush attempt. Number 1, Tyler Algier. Number 3, Bijan Robinson. Both facing over 7.2 defenders on average.
That makes sense.
Rush attempts. That makes a lot of sense why the Falcons are throwing so much. They've thrown 60% of the time their last 3 games. That is not what we're used to in this Arthur Smith offense. That's led to London and Pitts. They're very talented receivers, seeing 49 targets in that span. And the big deal is Ridder, 88 pass attempts the first 3 games, 115 the last 3. And this Bucs team is a very good run defense. They are top 5 in the league in rushing yards allowed. They only give up 3.4 yards per carry and 2 touchdowns on the season. So that's going to mean that we're going to have to throw. And that's good for Ridder, who's, again, only 5,200. You can pair him, and I talk about him in my DFS Stacks article that should be out, I believe, tomorrow. I mean, you can pair him with both London and Pitts, who, again, have seen 49 targets the last 3 games, and an offense that's throwing 60% of the time because teams are loading the box for a very reasonable price, under $15,000. So I think Ridder is a very good play, and he has proven even when he's bad, he's good. He threw 3 picks and still scored 22 points last week. So
We'll take it.
He's one of those fantasy guys. I like him a lot this week. There's a lot of value in him for how much he's throwing. And again, just the fact that Tampa's a great run D. Falcons are going to have to throw the ball to move it.
Yeah, I can see it. Obviously, yeah, like you said, we've seen more production out of the passing game. Obviously, it also came with some interceptions last week, but we're not too worried. I mean, listen, interceptions are bad. We lose 2 points, but it's much worse for your actual Atlanta Falcons.
For a guy in the low 5K, I'll take that.
Than it is for us.
He's done it 3 out of the last 5 weeks. So,
yeah, I think it's a very reasonable pick. And I think the thing we love about it, too, is people aren't going to want to put Desmond Ridder in their lineups. So that's a chance to gain some advantage. I'm going to go on the opposite side of the same game. I'm going to take Baker Mayfield at 5,300. We've seen the good and the bad from Baker this year. I don't think anyone's like, I don't think if you were someone who thought Baker was washed, you're like, oh, I was totally wrong. This guy's great now. But listen, we've seen a 300-yard game. It was against Chicago. I'll grant you that. But 7 touchdowns in the last 4 weeks to 2 interceptions. I was reading this schedule wrong. 7 touchdowns total to 3 interceptions because actually the Detroit game was last week, which was not great. But hey, Detroit's playing awesome this season. I'm not worried about that.
Yep.
And yeah, not playing the Atlanta Falcons last week also, that hurts because now he gets that little. Now we get the Atlanta defense, and this is a defense where you look at them against the pass, DVOA 29th against the pass, against the run 9th. So there you go. That's exactly what we want. Yep. We want a defense that funnels us towards passing the ball when we're talking about the QBs. Really, the biggest danger for me in any Atlanta game when you're choosing offensive players on the other side is because Atlanta tends to be so run-focused, we often end up with shorter games because the clock is constantly moving. That's kind of my biggest concern here. I think the other thing, too, is I think this is actually a game where you go away from Mike Evans. This is more of a sprinkle in everybody else game, maybe throw in some Cade Otton.
Oh, definitely
Godwin.
Cade Otton. You know how I feel about the Falcons.
Yeah, about tight ends.
Yeah.
Because, I do think we're going to see a lot of A.J. Terrell against Mike Evans. So that actually makes me like it more because I'm going to have the cheaper pairings with Baker Mayfield. So, I just look at this as, again, who's thrown 3 touchdowns against this defense so far this year? Jordan Love and Sam Howell.
Come on, Joe.
It's not the highest bar to clear. So I think Baker Mayfield, I think he can do
Giants, bro.
I mean, feel free because it can't get worse than the actual stuff on the field. We played our best game of the year last week, and it was still embarrassing somehow because that's who we are this year. But anyway, Baker Mayfield, like I said, if Jordan Love and Sam Howell can throw 3 touchdowns against the defense, Baker Mayfield can. So when we're talking under 5,500, I'm feeling pretty good about that.
Yeah, I again, it's hard to argue when Jordan Love and, again, Sam Howell, 3 passing touchdowns. Howell only threw for 150 yards, 3 touchdowns. Jordan Love only threw for 170 yards and threw 3 touchdowns. So, God forbid somebody actually has a big passing day.
Actually throws for yardage too.
Moving on to the running backs, I'm not going to lie. I really wish Kenneth Walker was 6,900 so we could include him in my plays.
100%.
Smash play for me this week, but we cannot use him for our plays. So give me Isaiah Pacheco, somebody you used last week, 6,100 versus the Chargers. Double-digit points, 5 straight games. The big thing, he is becoming the workhorse in this offense. 15 carries or more in 4 straight, touchdown in 3 or 4. Another really big thing, last week, season high in both receptions and targets with 6. He's been much more involved in the pass game than he was last year. Why is that important? Because the Chargers, boy, do they struggle with running backs catching passes out of the backfield. Just in their last 3 games, number 1 running backs have caught 19 receptions for 193 yards. That is not good. It's for that reason. I also don't hate Jerick McKinnon this week. If you want to kind of go a little contrarian, if you think maybe, McKinnon's already had that McKinnon game that drives you crazy if you're somebody that plays Pacheco like I do a good bit, where he had a 20-point game. He caught a couple of touchdowns. He could be a good play too, but I just think Pacheco's value with how he's been used in the passing game this year so much more, and the fact that, again, he's their workhorse on the ground, gets all the red zone carries. I think Pacheco is a very safe play against a bad Chargers defense.
Yeah, I'm going to co-sign that one with you this week because, it's a tale as old as time. You get the Chargers, you play a running back. And this again, one of those games that, granted, we've been burned on this year a couple times with the Chiefs. Screams shootout, just absolutely screams it. We've seen these teams play back and forth the last couple of years. The Chargers also usually stay competitive, which is a plus if we're trying to get those receptions. So, I say let's just ride this Pacheco train, man. A guy I didn't believe in at all coming out of college, and now I feel stupid because he's been the guy who came through all that Clyde Edwards-Helaire hype that happened for a couple of years. And it turns out the guy they drafted in the 6th round is better than the guy they drafted in the 1st round.
Can we stop giving the ball to Edwards-Helaire, though? Like the 2-3 carries
at all. Why does it happen still?
Off. Yeah, it's pissing me off.
It just needs to be Pacheco and McKinnon. We don't need Clyde Edwards-Helaire to be involved.
That's I think appeasing a general manager. My value play this week, and it is the true definition of a value. Zach Evans, 4K. It's just, this is strictly on value. Because let me say, the Steelers, they're good versus the run. They've been very good the last few weeks. But the reports are, with Kyron Williams, he's out. He's going to be out actually for a lot longer than I first thought. I think they said until after their bye, that Zach Evans is going to get first crack at being a running back. And running backs have done very well in Sean McVay offenses. And again, the Steelers defense, they've been good against the run, but just a reminder, week 2, kind of a similar situation. Nick Chubb got hurt. Jerome Ford saw his first real action, went over 100 total yards, scored 2 touchdowns, had a really big game. 4 of the 5 starting running backs to face the Steelers have caught 3 or more passes this season. That's free points on DraftKings. We'll take them, and we know the Rams like to throw to running backs in that McVay offense. I just think that at this price, he doesn't need to score that many points to justify, allowing me to put Cooper Kupp well of this week, Amon-Ra St. Brown, the Kenneth Walker, Lamar Jackson, these guys. It gives you so much flexibility, and I think he'll get 8 to 10 points, which that's enough to justify it. And if he has a good game and you have him in at 4K, now we're really talking.
Like you said, if things work out at that price point, we're doing backflips. We love it. I'm not going to be quite so bold as to go all the way down in the 4,000s. I'm going to go Jerome Ford at 5,100 against the Indianapolis Colts. Jerome, he's kind of had a really interesting fantasy season so far, where the last 4 weeks, he's got 2 games where he ran for a combined 190 yards on 33 carries, and then 2 games where he ran for 44 yards on 19 carries.
He scored.
That's true. And the 2 games where he didn't have any production, that was the Ravens, who are one of the best defenses in the league, and then the Titans, who, with one bizarre exception in that game against the Colts, have been maybe the best defense against running backs, at least purely from a running standpoint, or maybe the last 2 years. So, and last week, 17 for 84 against the Niners, with obviously a backup quarterback going, which may continue this week. I kind of think that's a wash as to who's the quarterback. The offense will be better if it's Deshaun, so more chances for a touchdown. The offense will be more run dependent if it's Ford. And one of the key things too is with the way that Browns defense is playing, I see this as a win. I see it as, for the Browns, I think it's a positive game script for the running backs. And that is important because the Colts are maybe the most average defense across the board. Like DVOA, they're 17th or 18th against the run and the pass and overall. So they're not a bad run defense, but they are a defense that has given up a lot of rushing touchdowns, 5 touchdowns the last 3 weeks, at least 1 in all 3 of those weeks as well. So touchdown opportunities, I think even with Kareem Hunt starting to get more carries, game like this, I think 15's the floor. We're hoping for 20. So I just think this is a play I just feel very solid and confident in at 5,100.
Yeah, I like it a lot too. I think it was so big that, Hunt was getting more carries. Ford had not been that productive. And then he came through in a big way in a huge game.
Yeah.
And I don't think that can be underestimated, like the effect of that, in his role. I think he kind of grabbed back the stranglehold, of that number 1 running back spot for the Browns. The wide receivers, who I feel very, 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 very good about these next 2 guys. There's actually a few guys all under 6K that I really like. I do want to say really quickly, Cooper Kupp should absolutely be in your lineups this week. I know he is an outrageous price, but I talked about this on the Inside Drive this week. I went back and looked at his last 23 games. He's caught 7 or more passes in 20 of 23 games. He's had 90 yards receiving or more in 20 of his last 23 games with Stafford. He's had 12 of those 23 games where he's caught 120 yards or more, and he scored a touchdown in 14 of those 23. And that's at least one touchdown. He had a bunch of multiple touchdown games.
Yeah.
And again, the Steelers they really struggled with receivers. So he's worth it. Like, use these value plays so you can get Cooper Kupp in your lineup. But anyway, Zay Flowers is the guy I want to talk about. I said I was really high on Lamar this week. Flowers is just such a great option this week, both because of obviously the volume he's been getting. 33 targets his last 4 games, 12.3 points or more in 3 of 4. I like that he's seen a rush attempt in every game but one this season. Just shows the Ravens know they got to get him the ball, in whatever way that may be. The Lions and I actually scored a touchdown last week, which I've been talking about. He was due for a touchdown. The Lions are 19th on DK versus wide receivers, but that is not why I'm so big on Flowers and also Andrews this week. It's the fact the Lions run zone defense the 6th highest rate in the NFL. Lamar this year has faced zone coverage on 70% of his pass attempts this year, and he's averaging 9.3 yards per attempt. That is the 3rd best among quarterbacks. And then those 2 guys I was just talking about, Zay Flowers and Mark Andrews, they are seeing a combined 50% target share this season when facing zone defenses, with both of them averaging over 2.38 yards per route run versus zone defenses. The Lions, they give up the least rushing yards in the NFL. So the Ravens are going to have a hard time running ball. It's another reason why I'm high on Lamar. I think he's going to run. There actually has been some QBs that had some success. Mahomes rushed for, I think, like 50 yards versus this team. But they have given up over 30 yards on the ground twice in the Mahomes. But they've also kind of struggled with these receivers, like the smaller ones, the more possession. I know it's a little unfair to Flowers because he obviously has big play capabilities, but a lot of his pass catches and his targets are short passes. Godwin last week, 6 catches, 77 yards. Romeo Dobbs, 9 catches, 95 yards. Tyler Lockett, 8 catches, 59 yards, 2 touchdowns. I really like Zay Flowers this week. I also like Mark Andrews. They're the exact same price. Unless the Lions, change it up and play man, but that has not, been what they've done this year. Lamar, again, has been great against the zone. I think Lamar has a huge day, and I think that both Flowers and Andrews go off, but I actually like Flowers more than Andrews this week.
Yeah, this is another one where I'm going to co-sign with you because, like you said, the man zone splits on Flowers are insane. Like, he really is a guy who just, like, he goes off my radar against top man teams and then goes against zone teams. And because you have enough of a split with that, he stays at a really reasonable price, which is, I mean, hey, we'll take it every single day of the week. Yeah. Or we're all in on that.
All right. So the value to me is the best play this week by far for his price. He is the Adam Thielen, who, I've been on Adam Thielen for a month.
Yeah.
And I'm very,
you've been the king of Adam Thielen.
I'm very sad to see what his price is going to be next week. I'm still going to play him. I can go ahead and tell you, I saw some stats today, like the last 4 weeks, that open or wide open, targets. Only Jamar Chase has more the last 4 weeks. So he's getting open too. He's just been great. But
we'll take that.
It's Marquise Brown, 5,300 at Seattle.
Yeah.
Target monster, 48 targets his last 5 games, 26 receptions in that span, touchdown in 3 of 5 games. And he's getting the right kind of targets. Last week, 3 red zone targets. That was second most among wide receivers. And he led all wide receivers in unrealized air yards with 153. And I know that the problem is Dobbs it's almost like Cinderella at the ball, right? Like it's striking midnight, and I get that. So there's probably going to be more unrealized air yards this week. But the fact that he's getting so many targets and they're throwing the ball down the field, it's just such a value at this price. And the Seahawks are dead last on DraftKings versus wide receivers. They've had 3 games this season where they've allowed multiple receivers on the same team to score 18 points or more on DraftKings. And I think, what we were talking about earlier, I think Seattle's offense is going to feast in this game, which just means more throwing, and that's good for Brown. Same thing why I've liked Thielen so much. It's the exact same situation. For me, he is going to be in just about every lineup, if not all of my lineups this week.
Yeah, I like that one a lot. I think you could do some interesting combos with that Seattle-Arizona game because I I think this is a DK
That's my
feast
game
week
stack.
as
I went
well.
with Dobbs, Brown, Walker, and Metcalf.
Because I think
about 48%
if you're doing
of your salary.
Yeah, because at least I'd say Walker or DK or both are going to have big games this week. Because that Cardinals defense, like you said, just keep playing people against the Cardinals.
I'm going to get into the stats versus number one receivers when I talk about DK Metcalf in a minute. It's ridiculous.
Yeah. So I'm going to go Josh Palmer, 48, against the Kansas City Chiefs. I've been seeing really reasonable numbers ever since Mike Williams has gone out. At least 7 targets in the last 3 games. He has 1 touchdown over that time, at least 60 yards in every one of those games. So he's giving us that really reasonable floor where we fully expect double digits every single week now with Josh Palmer. And I think there's a reasonable chance this is kind of a game where we get finally that explosion game that gives us a bit more. And that's once again because of man zone splits, where Kansas City, 5th in man coverage rate so far this season, 28th in zone rate. Josh Palmer, routes run versus zone, 107 routes for 77 yards. So he's not doing anything against zone.
It's the reverse of Flowers.
Under a yard per route. And then we get to the man routes, and it's 143 on 61 routes.
Wow.
So we're going from under 1 to almost 2.5. Again, expect this to be a shootout. I think a Pacheco-Palmer combination is fantastic because that's 10-5 for those 2 guys, and we can keep going with that game because again I think there's a lot of points, or we can go somewhere else with find that guy that you think is going to just go off this week. Again, throw in Cooper Kupp 100%. So I really love the Palmer Pacheco combination.
I like that a lot. I know we're the DFS guys, but would you go get Mecole Hardman if he's available in your leagues with the Chiefs receiving core and the fact that he's back in Kansas City?
I mean, if you really need wide receivers and you got an open slot, I think it's worth a shot. Because again, the only guy who's really kind of impressed this year is Rashee Rice. Yep. Everybody else, I mean, Tony, they try to get manufactured touchdowns every week, I think, to just make themselves feel better.
And they use Hardman in a lot of ways in that offense, or at least they did.
They were super creative with him.
Yep. So I think,
and he knows the system, obviously. Yeah,
he's fresh. Obviously, he's played like no down. So, moving on to the tight ends. I hope I don't get struck by lightning, Joe. If you remember, just 2 weeks ago on this show, I said that Kyle Pitts was dead to me, and I would never, ever suggest him again as one of my DFS plays. Since I made that statement, Pitts has seen 17 targets, caught 11 passes for 130 yards and a touchdown. How about that? Scored 14 points or more in back-to-back games. And you have to adapt or die in DFS, right, Joe? One of the things that I've always, kind of took pride in, and it's something I'll brag on both of us, is when we're wrong, we'll admit it, right? And I was wrong. I got off the train a little too early. I mean, the fact he's seen just under 8 targets per game for the last month. The dude's 4,000. And, again, Tampa Bay's great against the run. I told you how much teams are stacking the box versus both Algier and Robinson, forcing the Falcons to throw. And Pitts is a generational talent. So I think that this is kind of a smash play. There's some lineups where I'm going to maybe play Andrews or even my lower price guy like Otten or Musgrave, and put Pitts in my flex. I just think he's a really good play this week. Yeah,
this will be our third and final cosign here. I mean, his ADOT this year is 11.9, which is the highest for any tight end. And it's a 2-yard gap between him and the other tight ends with at least 25 targets. So, I mean, that was always kind of the thing when you looked at Pitts and London, because we were very depressed about both of them early on, is that, I mean, we have thankfully seen some life for London as well. But it was like when you looked at the deep targets, especially, it was like, all right, well, they're about equal. And then you're like, well, wait, but one of them plays wide receiver.
Right.
So Drake London, it was like you compared him to all the other receivers. You're like, oh, he's not ranking very high in any category. And you go, Pitts, like, well, if they just start connecting occasionally, there is life here. Like I said, I'm high on Baker Mayfield. I think this is a reasonable scoring game.
I like
So
the over
so that's all the more reason to like Kyle Pitts, because obviously we don't want Atlanta to take a big lead in this game, because then it can all go to shit real fast. I don't see that
happening either. Like Ritter will throw a pick or do something. Like, I mean, he's going to make life miserable for me. I love it though.
One quick stat I'll throw out. Absolutely. This is from Nathan Jenke from PFF. Pitts, so obviously, like we said, a lot of them intermediate deep targets. The Buccaneers have allowed an open receiver on 43% of passes that are thrown into the intermediate or deep level.
Hello.
So yeah, this is a defense that shallow is doing good, but they're fine. There's holes to be had if you can find them. So let's hope Kyle Pitts is one of the guys who finds them this week.
Makes me feel better about Drake London, who we'll talk about in just a little bit too. The value play at tight end, I was really close to going with Cade Otton. Again, the Falcons are so bad versus tight ends, people. So freaking bad. Logan Thomas, he let me down last week. But honestly, it was the game script. I mean, again, like, yeah, it would have been nice if he'd have caught a touchdown, but Hal threw for 150 yards and threw 3 touchdowns. So it wasn't like he was slinging it.
Right.
But I went with Luke Musgrave because, again, I like Jordan Love this week, and I actually like stacking him with Musgrave. He's 3,300. Denver is dead last versus opposing tight ends on DK. In their last 5 games, tight ends versus the Denver Broncos, 38 receptions, 446 yards, 3 touchdowns. What I like is Musgrave has seen 15 targets in his last 2 full games, at least 6 in each of them. And again, like I do worry a little bit about Aaron Jones being back because Denver's awful against the run too. So maybe the Packers finally can get the run game going, but that might actually help Musgrave, right? Like the play action and stuff. I just think at this price, again, 5 games, that's almost 8 receptions per, over 80 yards, and over half a touchdown per in the 5 games. So I think Musgrave's a smash play this week at that price.
I mean, he's one of our guys from the Senior Bowl. I remember watching him play. Really he burned an LSU safety, and then they were flashing up all those next gen tracking stats they had, and it was like, and you're like, this guy ran for over 20 miles an hour, and he's an Oregon State tight end. It's like, how have I not heard of this guy? And then I found out he missed almost the entire season because of an injury. And then it's like, well, that's how you find those under the radar guys. Although by the time the draft rolled around,
people were
a lot of people
with Mayer.
Oh my gosh!
Laporta, I mean, it's sick.
I mean, Laporta is just taking the league by storm. Which
like baby Gronk, man. I thought it was Freiermuth, but it's actually Laporta.
So I'm gonna get a little bit risky here by going real cheap on us. I'm gonna go Trey McBride, 2,600 against the Seattle Seahawks. Seattle just came off of probably, I'm just assuming, their best game against tight ends in the last 2 seasons against the Bengals.
We picked them a lot the last couple of years.
We have.
Like the Bengals have a tight end. No offense to Ursa.
No, they gave up 9 yards to the Bengals tight ends, which, again, that's not where Joe Burrow is looking first in that offense. Somewhat, I'm going to say flukishly, because I still don't think this is a great defense against tight ends. I haven't given up a touchdown yet. So, again, there is risk here. Also, Trey McBride is truly the second tight end on this team because Zach Ertz, who is also a very reasonable 3,200, is on the team. But I like the way that Trey McBride has been trending. This is a guy who was, I believe, a second-round draft pick. He was the top tight end out of CSU a year ago. This was a guy who, I mean, CSU was not a great football team, but he was there easily leading target every single week. He had over 800 yards his last season in college. What I'm liking though is, last week against the Rams, 4 catches on 5 targets, 62 yards.
Round pick too, so they have some capital in him.
Right, so they have some capital in him. And what I like too is his target rate. So when he's on the field, he's seeing a lot 7th among tight ends in target rate at 21.7%. So the whole issue is just getting him out on the field. I'm taking last week and him getting those 5 targets and being on the field more. I'm taking that hopefully as a sign that this is a guy who's going to increase as the season goes on. And potentially, I think at a certain point, probably not, as soon as this week, I could see him overtaking Ertz as the top receiving tight end in this offense. But 2,600 against, again, a team that historically has been really bad against tight ends, even if They're having a little boost lately. And again, a game where I think
they haven't played a ton of good tight ends this season.
And the game script, again, I think Seattle is going to have their way with this Cardinals defense. So I think the game script is very much in his favor. Really the best tight ends they've played is Laporta, who, had, I think, like a 5 for 60 game against them. So another very reasonable game for Laporta.
Game too?
No, but that's because Daniel Jones was being assassinated on every single play.
5 times, I forgot.
Yeah. So, assuming that there aren't 11 sacks in this game, I like the chances for the Cardinals tight ends. And, you can go with either guy, 32 or 2,600, but maybe it's too small of a sample size and it's safer to go Ertz, but 2,600 is just so low. And I think there's a reasonable chance we get a double-digit game here. So that's why I'm going with McBride even over Ertz.
I like it. Let's do the flexes. Boy, do I like Seattle this week, and I think Arizona's defense stinks. DK Metcalf, 6,800 versus Arizona. Now, obviously, you need to make sure that he's cleared to play because he's actually dealing with 2 different injuries. But from everything I've read, he's going to play. He scored double digits in every game played this year, but only one 20-point game and just 2 touchdowns. This is a guy that had 9 games of 90 yards or more and 18 touchdowns the last 2 seasons. So I really think he's due for a monster game. And boy, what a good defense to play when you need that. Arizona versus number 1 receivers the last few weeks. Cooper Kupp, 7 for 148, a touchdown. Jamar Chase, 15 for 192, 3 touchdowns. Brandon Ayuk, 6 for 148. If you're not good at math, that is in 3 games, 28 receptions for almost 500 yards and 4 touchdowns. I think this is the game he gets right. I really do. And I think he's really reasonably priced. Because if you look at it, the other than Kupp, the other top receiver, I do like St. Brown this week, I will admit, just because, again, I don't know how much Detroit's going to be able to run the ball. I think that means that, they're going to throw to him a lot. He's kind of their chain mover. But, 6,800, and again, he's scored at least double digits each week, so he's not going to kill you. But we know Metcalf is like the king of those 30, 40-point games. He's very similar to Mike Evans in a lot of ways. And one, I remember my best calls ever, Joe, was I think 2 years ago when Mike Evans had not had a monster game. He was playing a really good defense.
we knew it was coming and you called it.
He had 40 points. So I'm hoping that happens again this week with DK Metcalf.
All right. I love the DK Metcalf one because, to me, if he's a go, I'm in. I love that matchup against that Cardinals defense. The risk of being a homer here, I'm going to say my Giants score some points this week. They actually score a touchdown. And the guy who probably has the best odds of scoring that touchdown outside of Saquon Barkley, obviously, Darren Waller, 5,000 against the Washington Commanders. If you're like me and you heavily invested in Darren Waller this offseason, in all of your literally all of my season-long leagues, this has not been the best. Thankfully, in one of those leagues, I picked up Sam Laporta.
Oh, nice.
But at the same time, last 2 weeks, 13 receptions on 18 targets, 129 yards. Obviously, we're still waiting on that score.
In your defense, y'all have had a brutal schedule.
It has been a brutal schedule and a brutal amount of injuries on an already not good offensive line.
Right.
But, we don't know yet who's going at quarterback. My assumption is it's Tyrod, who actually I flirted with taking him as my low-tier QB because I think that's a very reasonable choice. I think you saw, outside of not audibling to run plays at the wrong moments, he looked reasonably good in that game. Washington, the last 2 weeks, 16 receptions on 20 targets, 3 touchdowns, 2 tight ends. Obviously, Kyle Pitts was one of those guys who had success. Yeah, Pitts, Janu, Cole Kmet, all 3 of those guys have gone off the last 2 weeks. Also, if you go back to week 1, the Cardinals, this was mostly Zach Ertz. Not a lot of yards, 44, but 8 receptions on 12 targets. So this is a team that has been giving 2 tight ends. Waller finally seems to be, I don't know what took so long, getting more involved in the offense. And I think Tyrod probably frees this offense up more in the fact that I think he's better at avoiding sacks than Daniel Jones is. I still think Daniel Jones ultimately raises the ceiling on the offense, but if he's banged up, I don't know if there's a huge difference, so I'm not worried either way. I think Waller's a solid play.
Do you like Wandell this week too? 3,800.
I do like Wandell. Also a guy
putting in like him and Evans, and then I can really load up at other positions. That's 7,800
so
for a running back.
The big change for the Giants over the last few weeks that I was kind of dying to see happen because I thought this is where we should be headed. The 3 wide receiver sets now, it's almost exclusively Slayton, Wandell, and Jalen Hyatt.
Yep.
And that is by far the highest ceiling, the most speed and athleticism that we can throw out there. So, yeah, I think Wandell, because he is the guy who I think is going to be consistently the highest targeted among those wide receivers in that slot role.
And that price,
and I believe
5-6 passes, like you're golden. And if he scores a touchdown or has a big receiving game, now we're really onto something.
Yeah, so I think there's definitely some. As long as Wandell is under 4, I think he's definitely a guy you can throw into lineups for sure.
All right, my value, Drake London, and again, I really like the Ritter Pitts London stack. 49 targets the last 3 weeks for those two guys. Falcons throwing it 60% of the time. Teams are stacking the box. You can get the 3 of them for 14,300. I mean, that's really cheap for guys getting that kind of targets. In London, 5 straight games with 6 or more targets, 28 targets over his last 3 games. Despite not scoring a touchdown the last 2 weeks, he still scored 39 points on DraftKings. And then not for nothing, last year with Ritter as starting quarterback against this Tampa Bay team, 6 catches on 8 targets, 120 yards and a touchdown. I love the stat you gave earlier about the Bucs really struggling down the field, which London has actually been the one that's getting even more deep targets hits in the last couple of games. So I actually like London a little bit more than Pitts this week if I'm just going with one. But I feel like if you're going to go with Ritter, you might as well do the double stack and just hope it goes off.
Yeah, I like the call there. We're just, if this works at that price point with those guys,
you can put Cup, you can go all kinds of directions with $35,000.
Yeah, can do whatever the hell we want if we do that. So I am going to double dip on the Giants. I'm going to go Jalen Hyatt though.
Ooh.
Now, obviously, again, bigger risk because Wandell is very consistently.
What's his price this week, Joe?
His 3,000.
Wow. Okay, now I see what you're doing.
So Hyatt again. Now he is consistently in those 3 wide receiver sets. He played 80% of the snaps last week. Now, also the other thing too is his stat line that you see is 3 receptions, 4 targets, 21 yards. Giants had, I don't know the exact yardage, but it was, I think, about a 40-yard pass that got wiped out by a phantom illegal man downfield that I'm not upset about at all. I swear, they flag it, and they're like, Evan Neal, and I'm like, God damn it, Evan Neal. Why can't you do anything right? And then they show the replay, and he blocks a guy 3 yards downfield and then turns around and goes back to the line of scrimmage. I'm like, Evan Neal didn't even mess this play up.
He has not had the second year that Andrew Thomas had that I told you I thought.
He is not. But the point is, Hyatt should have had a 60-plus yard game with 4 receptions, in which case that's a double-digit game already. So, yeah, and actually Hyatt, it might be a guy I like a little bit more if it's Tyrod versus Daniel Jones, just because, again, I think Tyrod's a little bit better about finding ways to just buy himself a little extra time. And the one thing he's always done well is throw deep balls.
Yep.
So I think I like it slightly more with him. I also just, again, Washington, 27th in DVOA against the pass. No team has given up more points to outside receivers. 6th most fantasy points overall.
Right? I think London had 3 catches of 20 yards or more, and London has not got the speed of Jalen Hyatt.
Yeah, and 24th in DVOA on deep bombs, so this is definitely a team that is open to giving up that deep pass that Hyatt is out there for. And again, also, last drive of the game on the line, he's the guy that Tyrod went to on a 4th down to convert. So this is a guy they're increasingly putting faith in. I mean, if you saw him play Alabama last year, you know what this guy can do if you let him get open deep.
I really like that draft pick for you guys. I think he's going to be really
good. So yeah, and then the risk is minimal because again, he's the lowest possible amount we can get for a wide receiver.
You're good, right? You just want
to you're like, oh, that was fine. He caught 2 passes for 65 yards. We got 8.5 points. We're good. I could easily be 4 passes for 110 yards and a score, and now we have a 20-point game.
Exactly.
So yeah, with again minimal risk, and actually one where I like slightly more if it is Tyrod, and I think it will be because Deion Jones has been practicing, but he's not yet cleared for contact. So monitor that tomorrow. If he's not cleared for contact tomorrow, it'll be Tyrod.
All right, real quickly, do a showdown lineup for tonight, and then obviously we'll pick. Joe still has a 1-game lead on me and our head-to-head with the spread. I want to thank the great Dave Eddy. That's Corporal Eddie on Twitter, who, again, if you're not following him, go check it out. He's been putting unreal stats up, but he's going with ETN as his captain tonight. Carr, Ingram, Kirk, Shaheed, and Thomas. I actually did do a lineup where I went with Michael Thomas as my captain. And then I kind of went a little bit different, just trying to attack the receivers. The Jaguars have been really bad versus the pass. Olave, Carr, and then I was able to put Ridley, Kirk, and McManus, who has been, I wish I would have drafted him in a few leagues for my season long. He's scoring like 10 points every game. But do you know the line? If not, I'll look it up for the game.
I do not know the line. I think as of yesterday, I believe it was Saints by 1. I have not looked today, though.
Because I guess that was probably before Lawrence. All right, real quickly, it was -2.5 for New Orleans. I'll go first, Joe. Give me the Jags. I think this Jaguars team is legit. I mean, if you look at like what they did, 2 games in London, they lost that game early, a bad game to the Colts, and yet here they are. And I've been saying it for a while. Trevor Lawrence is the next great quarterback in the NFL. Can't miss. I love the weapons they have. But the big thing is the defense is a lot better, I think, than people say. I know they give up passing yards, but they're not giving up a lot of points. And they're really good versus the run. I'm going to take Jaguars 24-17.
All right. Well, this is a chance for you to gain on me because I will go with the Saints. I mean, this is a tough game.
The Saints. Fuck the Saints.
I mean, totally fair. If I was you, I would probably also not be picking the Saints. This is a very close game. It's hard to read, but
picking the Cowboys, Joe.
Yeah, it has to be like decisive for me. Like they have to be playing the Giants for me to pick the Cowboys. Yeah, it's just for me. You got Lawrence banged up. You got a Saints defense that's good. It's it's the.
I'll admit that.
It's the Superdome on a Thursday. That's the short week. Anytime it's the short week, and it's a close game for me to call. I'm gonna lean towards that home team. So I got the Saints 23-20.
23-20. I like it, Joe. All right, you got anything you want to plug before we get out of here? Other than just we're doing really well. I mean, seriously, like just great stuff by you, me. I just hope we keep it rolling with these plays.
Oh, yeah. Well, like you said, check out the full DFS team, all the stuff that is going to put out. Because I'm just on the pod. You guys are putting out a lot of awesome content on the actual website. The only other thing I'll add is Major League Baseball, figure your shit out. I don't know why you're having, I know that it's different because they don't do the every other day thing that allows you to space games perfectly. But there's been all this stuff about how cheap you could buy Arizona Diamondbacks, Phillies tickets today. And yeah, part of that is I think people were like, oh God, we lost to the Phillies twice in a row and lost some enthusiasm.
It also 10 home runs.
It was also a game that started 2 p.m. local time on a Thursday.
I didn't even think about that. That's ridiculous.
Why in the fuck are you doing that? Crazy. I understand Philly is the furthest east team. You don't want to start the game too late. You got to at least push. You got to push that back at least an hour or two. I mean, there are people who live in Phoenix. They're not going to get off work till 5. They miss the entire game. It's insane to me that baseball.
Games, so it's not a big deal.
Yeah,
to start it later. Like it's not like the old school playoff game where it's going to last 5 hours.
Right. Force Houston and Texas to go at 7 and start this game at 4. Like there's no reason for the game to start at 2:00.
Oh, and Arizona, by the way, just the final.
2-1, which again means that game didn't last too long because it was a 2-1 game. So yeah, there's absolutely no reason, especially with the shortened games, for you to start a game at 2 p.m. local time in the championship series. So baseball, get your crap together. This is why you're the dying sport while the NBA and NFL continue to do awesome.
Yeah, it's a slap in the face to the fans too. And honestly, it's a disadvantage for the team because obviously the crowd at 2:00 is not going to be drunk like the one in Philly, which it's always told.
Well, to be fair, I think if it had been in Philly, the crowd would have still been drunk at 2 p.m.
No, that's
but
but you know what I mean. Like it's just like with Atlanta. I always tell people,
makes no sense.
Games, like the primetime games, that crowd is great. 1:00 games, dude, until about halftime,
so
it's half full.
Exactly. So completely unrelated to anything else, but just I had to get that off my chest because it's ridiculous. But yeah, go D-backs. And hey, my Arizona Wildcats might actually be a good football team this year. We're not Georgia, but hey, we're headed to a bowl maybe. So us heading to a bowl is you making the playoff. Comparatively.
We'll see how we react with the Bowers injury. But before we get out of here, I do want to the work by the DFS team here is so good, so extensive. You should check all of it out. I've had a really successful year this year on DraftKings. And you want to know why? I'm listening to Chris's stuff. I'm reading Chris's stuff. I'm listening to their show with Dave and Chris. I'm texting both of them. I'm listening to obviously Joe's plays, my plays. And then, after hearing all that information, I'll come up with, again, to me, it's all data, right? Like what stats are the best. And, it's great stuff. If you listen to all of it, I promise you would be winning money this year. I've had several people on Twitter who have reached out thanking us. Gary obviously won like 20 grand. It was week 2 or 3 and was, so kind about it. Not only to send that tweet, but to send both of us actually $100 to put on DraftKings. We really appreciate all the people that listen to us, and we will always
absolutely.
Like I say, I can't guarantee you our plays will be great, but I can guarantee you there will be a lot of research, thought.
There's reasons we pick who we pick, whether it works or not.
We're not just throwing stuff at the wall. So, Joe, as always, great to see you. Screw the Saints. And let's hope maybe the Giants and Falcons get a win this week. Be sure to check
It'd be nice. It'd be nice.
And if you're not subscribing to this YouTube channel, subscribe now. We'll see you next week, guys.